Hey guys, okay, so I can't flip my camera or otherwise it won't keep recording. So I'm gonna show you what I'm doing. I have your practice test. I call it your practice test. It's actually just the test, but it's Form A. And so I'm gonna give you, for your actual test on Friday, I'm gonna give you Form B. So it's not this exact test, but it's very similar. So I'm gonna show you how I worked out everything. I'm gonna actually turn my phone sideways so I can record a little bit better. I'll show you how I worked out everything, and then I'll just read the questions as we go. So what I would do if I were you is I would make notes I would make notes for myself if I were you. And so you can pause this video as you need to. You can go back and rewatch it. But I'm just going to show you how I did every single problem, and I'll walk you through it. All right, so number one, I'll read each question, and then I'll just show you how I did it. So number one says, Morgan won 7 blue ribbons and 4 red ribbons at her horse shows. What is the ratio of red ribbons to blue ribbons that she won? So it tries to trick you because it tells you in the blue-red order, but then it asks you the question in the red-blue order. So I went ahead and I wrote it out, 7 blue, 4 red. That's what it tells us, but then it's actually asking us the answer in how many red ribbons and how many blue ribbons. So I swapped these. I put my blue on top here because that's what it told me, but then I swapped it because the answer wants it in blue on the bottom and red on the top. So 7 blue to 4 red is the same thing as 4 red to 7 blue, 4 to 7, or 4 to 7. So I went ahead and wrote it down. I write everything down just so I don't get mixed up. I have a lot going on in my brain, and I don't want it to, I don't want to just accidentally get the thing wrong. Because if you look at it, letter D is the flip-flop of it. So if you weren't really paying attention, you would have gotten it wrong. All right, so number 2 is talking about hockey teams. And so the table shows the number of wins and losses for 4 hockey teams. So then it's got the hockey teams records, and it lists all of the teams: Lightning, Wolves, Thunder, and Eagles. And then it actually lists their wins and losses. So 14 wins, 7 losses. So I made a ratio out of it, and I said 14 to 7. So 14 divided by 7, because if you remember, 14 to 7 is the same thing as 14 to 7. So we could actually go ahead and just divide. 14 to 7 is a fraction. It just means to divide. So 14 to 7, divide those two, I get 2. 15 to 5, I get 3, because it's 15 wins and 3 losses. Oh, sorry, 15 to 5, 15 wins and 5 losses. When I divide that, I get 3. 15 wins and 3 losses, I divide that, I get 5. 12 wins and 6 losses, I divide that, and I get 2, which is the same thing as what I got for Lightning. So it's Lightning and Eagles, but if you aren't paying attention, you might have chosen letter A because they list Lightning first. But that's not the correct answer. The correct answer is letter D, because it's Lightning and Eagles, or Eagles and Lightning. And so they went ahead and, I think, tried to trick you. So make sure that you're really looking at what the answer and the question are asking, or what the question is asking, what the answer is stating. All right, next one, number 3. So number 3 is talking about popcorn. And so it says, Jason used 0.5 cups of kernels to make 16 cups of popcorn. How many cups of popcorn would he make if he used 0.75 cups of kernels? Okay, so this one is a lot to do in my head because we're talking about 0.5, and we're trying to get kernels to cups. So 0.5 kernels make 16 cups. But then it says how many cups, so I don't know how many it is, so I put a question mark, would 0.75 cups of kernels make? Well, the thing with ratios is it cannot just be added. I have no idea how I got from 0.5 to 0.75 with multiplying or dividing. I know that I could divide 0.75 by 0.5 and get an answer here, but I decided an easier way to do it actually would be algebra. So remember, with ratios, it is only multiplying or dividing, not adding or subtracting. So if you think about it, like with a recipe, if you're going to double the recipe, you would multiply by 2. If you're going to triple the recipe, you'd multiply by 3. Quadruple the recipe, you multiply by 4. So we're multiplying 0.5 times something to get 0.75. Again, I don't know what it is, so I'm going to figure out this. The way I did this was an algebra way. I think it's a whole lot easier. So when it says how many cups would it make, how many cups of popcorn would it make, I don't know. So I used an X just to represent an unknown. And I cross multiplied. I said 0.75 times X is just 0.75x. It's equal to 16 times 0.75. So I went over here and I multiplied 16 times 0.75. I didn't have to put that 0 in there. I just wanted my digits to line up, but I made sure to put my decimal. I multiplied it out, moved my decimal over, and I get 12. So 0.75x is equal to 12. I don't want to know what 0.75 times x is. I just want to know x. So I need to undo that 0.75 being multiplied. So I'm going to divide by 0.75 on both sides. When I do that, I get 0.75 divided by 0.7, oh sorry, not 0.75. 0.5 divided by 0.5 is just 1. So I have 1x. 12 divided by 0.5 is 24. And the way I know that is because I went over here and I divided. 12 divided by 0.5, I move my decimal over, move my decimal over. 5 goes into 12 2 times. 2 times 5 is 10. I get a remainder of 2. Bring down my 0. 4 divided by 5 is 20. Good grief. 4 divided by 5 is 20. 20 minus 20 is 0. So my correct answer is 24. 24 cups is letter C. If you just really quick looked at this and you said, you know what, I think half of 12 is 6. Well, 6 is not even an option. Thank goodness, because that way they couldn't trick you. It's not asking what half of 12 is. It's asking how many halves are in 12. So in other words, if I took 12 and I divided it up into halves, in each one of those, there's 2 halves. So basically we're saying, what is 12 times 2? Because remember that division is just the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So 12 divided by 0.5 is the same thing as 12 divided by 1/2. So that's the same thing as keep, change, flip. And then I get 24 over 1, which is the same thing as 24. All right, number 4 says, and we have actually done this one before on a bell ringer, there are 24 children and 16 adults at the playground. What is the ratio of children to total number of people at the playground? Select all the equivalent ratios that represent this relationship. So I went ahead and set it up. I said 24 children to 16 adults, but then I remembered it asked me for children to total. So I said, well, there's still 24 children, but if I add up the 24 and 16, 24 plus 16 is 40. So it's 24 to 40. So letter A is correct, 24 to 40, but it says select all the equivalent ratios. So I went ahead and I reduced and I said, well, 24 divided by 2 is 12, 40 divided by 2 is 20, but that's not an option. But then if I keep on reducing, 12 divided by 2 is 6, 20 divided by 2 is 10, that's a letter C. And then if I reduce one more time, 6 divided by 2 is 3, 10 divided by 2 is 5. So letter E is also correct. 3 over 5, 6 over 10, 24 over 40. Or we're talking about ratios here, so 24 to 40, children to total, 6 to 10, and 3 to 5. All right, number 5 we've also done as a bell ringer. It says, a museum recorded that it had 988 visitors in 4 hours. What is the unit rate in visitors per hour? So per hour just tells me I want to know 1. Unit rate always means 1. So in other words, I'm trying to divide, well, I am going to divide because I'm trying to figure out, instead of 4 hours, I want to get down to 1 hour. So 4 to 1, I would have to divide by 4. So 988 divided by 4, I go ahead and work it out and I get 247 visitors, which is letter B. All right, number 6 is the first kind of tricky one on here. First of all, it shows a graph, so you're gonna have to learn to read a graph if you don't know already. Hopefully you do know how to read a graph already. Oh, that's my dryer. My dryer tells me that my laundry is done now. Number 6 says, the graph shows the ratio of apples to oranges in the different fruit baskets that Keenan makes. So Keenan's fruit baskets, I'll go ahead and read it, and I'm just gonna choose one of these to work with. I chose the easiest one. So I did apples to oranges. And so I looked and I said, okay, well, there's 4 apples and there's 6 oranges. So I went ahead and made a ratio. But then it says, but if Keenan makes a basket with 6 apples, so I went ahead and filled in 6 apples, what is the ratio of apples to oranges written as a fraction? Okay, so I'm going to put the written as a fraction to the side for a second. I just really need to know how many oranges are there. So I did this the same way as what I did number 3. I made it an algebra problem because I felt like it was a lot easier to cross multiply. So I said, well, I don't know how many oranges, but I do know that there's 4 apples to 6 oranges. So when there's 6 apples, how many oranges are there? I'm going to cross multiply. I went ahead and let x stand for the unknown. So 4 times x is 4x. 6 times 6 is 36. Divide both sides by 4 because I just want to know what x is. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. So I just have 1x. 36 divided by 4 is 9. 9 is not the correct answer because it says written as a fraction. So I went ahead and I made it be 6 apples to 9 oranges. Don't reduce it here because it's really specifically asking if there were 6 apples, how many oranges would there be? So the correct answer is actually 6 to 9. I know it's tempting to reduce it down to 2/3, but that's not the correct answer. It specifically wants apples to oranges whenever there's when there's 6 apples. So 6 to 9 is the correct answer. Okay, I'm going to try really hard to let this one not be confusing. You have a table and you have to fill in the missing values on the table. So in 4 middle schools, the teacher to student ratio is equivalent. Okay, so that means good. That means that whenever I divide something, I can figure out what to multiply by every single time. How many teachers and students are at each school? So schools A, B, C, and D. So I went ahead and let me see if I can label these. It's kind of hard to write whenever I'm looking through a phone, but there's A, B, C, and D. Okay, so school A, it tells us that there are 15 teachers and 330 students. So that means that I know I multiplied by something to get 330, but I don't know what it was. So I'm going to go over here and divide. I'm going to say 330 divided by 15. When I do that, 330 divided by 15, I get 22. So that means 15 times 22 is 330. Okay, so then that means it tells me on school B how many teachers there are. It tells me that there's 23. So I'm going to multiply it by 22 as well. So 23 times 22, I multiply it, I get 506. So that's my first box. Then it doesn't tell me how many teachers on school C, but it does tell me how many students. So I'm going to do the same thing I did up here. I'm going to divide. But this time I'm going to divide 550 divided by 22 because I know I'm multiplying by 22. So I say 550 divided by 22. When I do that, I get 25. So 25 is my correct answer here. If you need to pause it to look at how I divided, make sure you do that. It's just simple long division. It's the same thing that we always do, but if you get a little bit mixed up, I want you to slow down and make sure you look at it to see what I did. Finally, on letter D, we're back to an easy one again, where we just have to say, how did I get from 36 to 792? Well, I multiplied by 22, the same thing as what I've done on the others. So I came over here to the side, and I multiplied 36 times 22, and I got 792. So that fills in my answer right there for 792. All right, back to another easy one. This is talking about unit rate, basically. It just says, well, first we have to figure out what the unit rate is, and then it says how many how many miles would Miss Patel drive in 7 hours? So Miss Patel drove 160 miles in 3 hours. If she continues driving at the same speed, how many miles will Miss Patel drive in 7 hours? So the first thing I have to do is figure out, well, how many miles is she driving in 1 hour? So I figured out 165 divided by 3 is 55 miles per hour, or we could also call it 55 miles per 1 hour. But I don't want to know what 1 hour is. I want to know how far she's driving in 7 hours. So to get from 1 hour to 7 hours, I multiplied by 7. So I've got to do the same thing here. 55 times 7. When I do that, I get 385 miles. All right, number 9. Pablo uses 13.5 cups of flour to make 6 batches of muffins. How many cups of flour does he use per batch? So he uses 13.5 cups for 6 batches, but I don't want to know how much he uses for 6 batches. I want to know how much he uses for 1 batch. So to get from 6 to 1, I divided by 6. I'm going to do the same thing up here. 13.5 divided by 6. I'm going to go over here to the side. 13.5 divided by 6. I had to actually add a 0 here so that I could keep on going. 6 goes into 13 2 times, which is 12. I get a remainder of 1. I bring down my 5. 6 goes into 15. Bring up my decimal. 6 goes into 15 2 times. 2 times 6 is 12. I get a remainder of 3. Bring down a 0 that I added so that I can keep on going. 6 goes into 30. 5 times and I'm done. 5 times 6 is 30 with 0 remainder. So my correct answer is 2.25 cups. All right, number 10. Melinda earns $48 for every 3 lawns she mows in her neighborhood. She wants to buy a skateboard that costs $208, including tax. That is a pricey skateboard. How many lawns will Melinda have to mow to be able to buy the skateboard? Okay, well, the first thing we have to do is figure out how much does she make per lawn. So we look and we say, well, $48 for 3 lawns. I don't want to know 3 lawns. I want to know 1 lawn, so I divide by 3. 3 lawns divided by 3 is just 1 lawn. 48 divided by 3 is 16. If you don't know this fact, you need to, because this book seems to use 48 divided by 3 a lot. So 16 times 3 is 48. Whenever I do that, I figure out that it's $16 per lawn. But she needs to make $208 at least. So how many 16s can go into 208? When I do that, 16 goes into 20 one time. 1 times 16 is 16. 20 minus 16 is 4. Bring down my 8. Looky there. There's another 16 and 48. 16 goes into 48 3 times. 3 times 16 is 48 with no remainder. So 13 is the correct answer. 13 lawns. All right, finally, number 11. And this is probably the trickiest one of the whole entire test. Not really tricky because it's hard, but tricky because it has a lot of information on it, and you just have to sort out the information. Kaya recorded the distance she rode her bike during 4 different workouts. She rode the same number of kilometers per hour during each workout. Well, let me pause 1 second. Whenever I said Kaya, this is not actually how we spell our dog's name, but this is Kaya, and she looked up when I said Kaya, and that's Stella. So Kaya, Piggy Poo, Piggy. There she is. Kaya thought we were talking about her, but we were not. Okay, back to this. So Kaya recorded the distance she rode her bike during 4 different workouts. So I went ahead and I wrote down part A. I wrote down the table, even though I didn't draw the table. I actually probably would suggest you draw the table so you don't get all mixed up, but I'm going to show you what I did. I just put a question mark whenever there was a blank box. So question mark to 10, but then it gives us 1.5 to 30. It gives us 2. It doesn't give us that box, so 2 to question mark. It doesn't give us this box on the top, but it does give us 70 on the bottom. So when we're talking about the top is actually talking about number of hours. The bottom is talking about the distance in kilometers. So kilometers is on the bottom and number of hours is on the top. So I went ahead and went with this one because this is the only one that it gives me both. I know that I multiplied something times 1.5 to get 30, but I don't know what it was. So I divided first over here. I said, well, what is 30 divided by 1.5? Moved my decimal over here, moved my decimal over here. So now I have 15 going into 30. My 2 should probably be a little bit more over here over this 0, but anyway, 2 times 15 is 30. I have no remainder, but I still have a 0 here I have to use. So I need to put a 0 up here. 0 times 15 is 0, and I have nothing left over. So my correct answer is 20. So I went ahead and filled in my 20 right here. I multiplied by 20. So in order to figure out, this is the one I did next actually. I said, okay, well 2 times 20 is 40. I could do that one in my head. And then I decided, well, I don't know which one's going to be easier to do, but I know that I have to figure out 70 divided by 20 to get this answer. So I said 70 divided by 20. 20 goes into 70 3 whole times. 3 times 20 is 60. I have a remainder of 10. I have a decimal here because I have to add a decimal and a 0 so I can keep going. So I bring up my decimal, bring down a 0. 20 goes into 100. If you don't know this fact, you need to, because 20 times 5 is 100. You use that a lot. 5 times 20 is 100. Subtract and I get 0. So my correct answer here is 3.5. So I filled in that box. So I have 3.5 on the top. I filled in this box of 40. The last one I have to do is this one. So 10 divided by 20. So I have to say 10 is being divided by 20. So 20 goes into 10, it doesn't. So there's a 0. 0 times 20 is 0, but I didn't put that line down because I just knew it was 0. So nothing changed. Actually, I guess I really could have done it like this. Let me see if I can actually do this while I'm looking at the phone. So I should have, or I could have done this. That way I'm representing that 0 there. I still obviously get the same answer, but that way you can see that extra line for my 0. Okay, so anyway, back to this. So 5 times 20 is 100, and I have nothing left over. So my correct answer here is 0.5. So that's part A. Then, don't let this be confusing, but I went ahead and drew out the graph. So part B, on your graph, it shows you Kaya's bike rides. And it says graph the 4 points from the table to show the distance Kaya rode based on the number of hours she rode. So the number of hours, they're down here on the bottom. The distance, I had to kind of squish them in here, but they're kilometers and they go up the side. This, they already have it labeled on your graph, but anytime you're looking at a graph, this is the X and this is the Y. And the reason we need that is because we're looking at ordered pairs. We're looking at coordinates on our coordinate plane. So the X and the Y. Okay, so I just looked at my chart, or at my table up here, and I said, okay, so my X was talking about the number of hours. X down here is number of hours. So 0.5 is my X, 10 is my Y. So I went over to 0.5, and then I went up to 10. Let's see if I can let that focus in. I went up to 10, so over to 0.5, up to 10. I plotted a point. Then the next one that I did, and I actually went over here and wrote them so I wouldn't get mixed up. 0.5 to 10, 1.5 and 30, 2 and 40, 3.5 and 70. So I went ahead and graphed them. 1.5, I go over to 1.5, go up to 30, graph my point. I go over to 2 and up to 40, over to 2, up to 40, and I go over to 3.5 and up to 70, and I graph my point. Now, if she rides for 0 hours, she goes 0 kilometers, right? So 0, 0 would be another one. That's a very ugly 0. That's kind of an understood one, good grief, that's just getting uglier. Okay, it looks like a little owl. All right, so anyway, if she rides her bike no hours and she goes no distance, so 0, 0 is always going to be the origin. It's always going to be where a line starts, and this is called a proportional analogy. Like, these are ratios, or they're proportional. As she rides, the more hours she rides, the further she goes. So as this increases, they're proportional. It's a proportional ratio. So that means that it's going to be a line. It's going to actually be a line. These dots or these points are going to all connect starting at 0, starting in the origin. Okay, that was a little bit of extra information that you didn't necessarily need. But once it's already plotted, you can look over here, and I just looked at this and I said, okay, which one's going to be the easiest to do? Well, I know that 40 divided by 2, because it actually says how many kilometers did she ride per hour. And if you remember, this is talking about hours. This is talking about kilometers. So I'm actually just trying to get this side down to 1. How will I get 2 down to 1? Well, I just want it to be 1. Whoops, good grief. It's really hard to write whenever you're looking through a phone. How did I get from 2 to 1? I divided by 2. I'm going to say 40 divided by 2, which I did here, and it's going to be 20. I don't think I can write a 20 here without my paper moving, but we'll see. Oh, that looks like a kindergartner is writing a 20. Okay, so I could actually plot a 1 and a 20, and it's going to fall exactly on my line as well. But I don't actually have to plot that because it doesn't ask me to plot that one. But for 1 hour, if she rides her bike 1 hour, she goes 20 kilometers. So the correct answer is 20 kilometers per hour.